Number 1. Okay, so first off, this happened a few months ago. I had just moved into an apartment complex and only had a bed, a TV, a rocking chair, and an Xbox One. I work in a town that is about an hour away and they didn't have anything available that I could move into. So this big city, that was the next closest place that was also in my price range. The first few weeks play out the same. I get up, shower, go to work for 10 hours, come home, eat, watch a little Netflix, go to sleep, repeat. On my days off, I travel 3 hours away to see my wife and kids. Now, we aren't divorced or separated. I had to relocate from the town we lived in to start my career as an asset protection manager. One night as I was going through my evening routine, someone knocks on my door. It's a woman, maybe 5'7", brown hair, skinny. She looked like she was methed out of her skull. Her eyes were barely even open. She asked to talk to someone named Jareth. I told her no one by that name lived here. She said he did. She said she was here last Thursday and he was here. She wanted to buy drugs from him and this was the address she was given. I once again told her that no one named Jareth lived here and then shut the door on her. She started banging on the door, crying on how she needed her fix. I told her to screw off. After a few moments, I heard someone yell at her to shut up or they were calling the cops. The banging stopped and I never saw her again. I sat back down to continue watching the movie that I had on Netflix. I started thinking about what the woman had said. She couldn't have been here last Thursday. I was off work last Thursday and Friday with my wife and children. I started to look around more closely. Nothing seemed out of place. I checked all the windows. Nothing was cracked or broken. All the security bars were locked in their places. There were no upper attic spaces nor crawl spaces. Nothing. I felt a little more secure and went about my night as usual. My next days off, I made sure everything was locked and nothing was out of place. I went to see my wife as usual. I told her about what had happened and she suggested I take the pellet gun. Now I know, what is a pellet gun going to do? Well, in her thinking, it looked like a real gun. In the dark, no one can really tell the difference. Same for at a distance. Plus, it had a CO2 cartridge in it and 10 pellets. So I took it. When I got back, I looked around. Nothing was out of place. Nothing was missing. I put my stuff up as usual and turned on my Xbox. This is where I noticed something was off. When it powers on, it takes you to the home screen. On this screen, you can see the last thing you were on plus the previous things you've done. When I left it, the last thing that should have been on there was the Netflix app, but it wasn't. Instead, it was Battlefield 1. The one before that was Mortal Kombat X. Someone had been using my Xbox. I once again did a thorough search of the apartment and I found nothing. It was a couple of days after that, the guy across from me approached me while I was getting out of my vehicle. He said that a lot of people were coming by the apartment on certain nights and were making a lot of noise and that it keeps his daughter up, and if I could keep it down or just stop doing whatever it was that I was doing on those nights. I was completely confused as to what the heck he was talking about. I must have shown it because his facial expression changed. He asked me if I was the one who was having people over at odd hours of the night. I told him no, and then I proceeded to tell him the things that were happening. I told him I'm 200 miles away on my days off. We both came to the conclusion that someone was getting into my apartment when I wasn't there. I made the decision not to go see my family one week to see if the person using my apartment would show up. Of course, no one came that week or the week after. It dawned on me at work one day during a conversation about how shoplifters would try to see what vehicle you drove to know if you were there, and that's when it hit me. Whoever was using my apartment knew what I drove. With that in mind, I waited till my next days off to set up my trap. On the said day, I parked my vehicle 3 complexes down and walked back. I unscrewed all my light bulbs and waited in the corner in the living room. I had let my neighbor know what I was doing just in case any trouble might occur. I put my phone to its lowest brightness and had my camera ready, flash and all. I waited for 6 hours, which felt like forever, before it happened. I heard the front door knob jiggle. I got up, phone in one hand and pellet gun in the other. The door opened and someone entered, shutting it behind them. Then I heard a click, and then another. They were trying to switch on the lights. I then saw a light from the doorway. They had their phone out and they were making their way into the room I was in. As soon as they entered the doorway, I snapped a picture. The brightness of the flash caught him completely off guard. He was momentarily stunned, cursing at me, trying to make his way back to the front door. I yelled at him to get out of my apartment and never return. He had reached into his pocket, dropping something as he pulled out a small pocket knife. I immediately raised the pellet gun and cocked a hammer. That stopped him completely. He dropped the knife, opened the door, and ran out. My neighbor, who had heard me yelling, was waiting outside of his place when the man ran out. He saw me run out of my apartment, gun and all, and asked if I had shot him. I told him no and that it was just a pellet gun, but the man didn't know. I went back to the door and retrieved the pocket knife and what he dropped. It was a key to my door. Don't know how he got it, but he had it. I showed the picture to my neighbor. He thought he recognized him, but wasn't sure. I stayed up late that night calling my wife and tell her what had happened. The next day, I went over to the complex office and told them what happened. I brought up the fact that he had a key to my door and I wanted to know why he did. They weren't sure. Then I showed them the picture of the man. They knew right then how he had a key. Turns out the person who was going into my apartment complex was a maintenance worker for them. He had been one of the ones renovating my apartment before I moved in. They're given keys and he must have made a copy of one. Then for nights at a time he would use it to do whatever it was he wanted. I must have put a hamper in his nightly business when I moved in. That is, until he figured out my routine. The man was of course fired from his job and prohibited from entering the grounds ever again. I was given 3 months of free rent. I never pressed charges and decided to just let it go. I now have a real gun now just in case. My neighbor and I struck up a friendship and now we watch each other's places whenever we're out of town. Hopefully this never happens again to anyone else. And yes, I had the locks changed in case you are wondering. Number 2. This was 2015. I wasn't really actively looking, but would occasionally pop on to OkCupid every few weeks to see if anything interesting was in my inbox. Being a female, I had a very active inbox. I noticed an email from an interesting, fairly local guy. The email was alright, asking about polyamory, which I don't mind talking about if the person asking is sincerely interested and respectful. We got to chatting. I had zero romantic or sexual interest, but thought this could be a friendship. After a few months of chatting, he found me on the Book of Faces, asked if it was okay to send a request, and I agreed. We'd been chatting, getting along well, and he seemed like a nice person. A little weird, but that's okay, because I'm a little weird myself. No big deal. We continued to chat here and there for about 2 years. We send birthday greetings, just casual friendship. He's asked me several times to meet, to hang out, etc. I've definitely considered it, but at the time I was running my own business and was working upwards of 70 hours a week, plus maintaining my own home, raising my younger child, and trying to balance 2 partners and an extremely needy, demanding workaholic client who had no boundaries. So the meetup never occurred, but we kept in touch online. Late last year, a news story broke out about a man and his girlfriend raping and murdering her young teenage daughter. I never connected the name until a friend contacted me and said, "Oh, I see you're friends with blank. Did you see the news?" The news stories all use his full legal name, not his nickname, which is why I never connected the two. It was him. My then online friend of 2 years had beaten, raped, strangled, and then dismembered his girlfriend's teen daughter with the girlfriend's help. He's made several statements since then stating that he's always had this rape/murder fantasy, and that this child was very sexual and that it wasn't fun murdering her, as he apparently thought it would be. It still sends chills down my spine. I dodged a bullet big time. Be safe out there. You never know who is on the other side of that keyboard or phone call. Number 3. When I was 7 or 8, my family went to the beach and rented a room. We had the kind of rooms where you rent out both and they connect through a door. Like there's the doors to leave the room and the doors to the other room. In the room connected to ours, there was this army family. Military dad, some kids, and a wife. My older sister was supposed to be watching me as we were down at the jacuzzi during the evening. As we're playing and hanging out and just having a good time, this mom literally sits in the jacuzzi with us. She just starts talking to us and is making herself really comfortable. I was very naive as a kid. Eventually we start talking about books and she starts talking about her kids and we're just having a good conversation. Really in depth, I felt like. My sister decides she wants to go back to the room, but I don't. I wanted to stay and talk with the mom. So my sister goes back to the room and now it's just 7-year-old me and some 40-year-old woman. It should have definitely set off some creepy alarms, but it didn't. So she starts talking about going and walking on the beach. It's like 10 p.m. at the time and she wants to go walk on the beach and get shells. I thought it was a great idea and I'd get to walk on the beach at night. I remember feeling so free and feeling like a big kid. I didn't need my sister or my parents or anything. So I run back to the room to tell my grandparents that I'm walking on the beach with Sue, or whatever her name was. I remember my grandmother reading her book, barely listening to what I said. She just shooed me off. So I start walking down the creepy motel corridor. So I'm going through the stairwell like something out of a movie. Too bad I'd never seen this movie. So I'm walking through the stairwell and the mom's way at the bottom telling me to hurry up and this and that. While walking through the stairs, the army dad comes running to where I'm at. He told me, "Your mom is calling you. It's really important, we gotta go." And basically grabbed me by the wrist and led me back to our room. He knocked on the door and explained what had happened. I never thought much of it until about a year ago when it came back to me. This woman was leading me away to the beach alone at night, and this army guy got a terrible feeling in his gut, so he intervened. When he said my mom was looking for me as I don't live with my mom, it set off some alarms in my head. That's when I realized something was up, so I didn't resist going back to my family. As a kid, I knew since he was saying my mom wanted me, it was important. I just knew something was up because I don't live with my mom. I'm now 20 years old and I truly believe that mom was trying to lure me away to do God knows what. And this unknown army dude had a bad feeling and saved my life. Thinking back on it, I get such a bad feeling all throughout my body. I know now that I wouldn't have made it back from that beach trip. To the army dude that saved me, I just want to say thanks. Your gut feeling and having a watchful eye saved something terrible from happening. That woman was creepy, and I'm glad I ended up okay. Number 4. This happened about an hour ago. I was riding the subway back to my dorm after dropping my boyfriend off at the train station. Being extra cautious on the subway, I sat in the seat closest to the window. A man came and sat next to me and I glanced over to look at him. As I did this, I noticed a man sitting across from me staring openly at me while playing with a rope in his hands. This wasn't a small piece of rope. It was a thick boating line. I thought this was odd, so I decided to look away. I glanced back periodically, and every time I did, he was still staring, licking his lips and tying knots in the rope. At this point, I'm pretty freaked out, so I stare out of the window. As I do this, I catch his reflection. He's openly staring at me, licking his lips and still tying the knots. I get off at my stop and didn't notice him get off. I walk down to the platform for the northbound train and sit on a bench next to a kind-looking lady. There was only about a foot or so between us. Definitely not enough room for someone else to sit down. As I glanced down to check the time, the same man from the train came and sat directly next to me, between the lady and me. At this point, I'm freaked, but I didn't want to make a scene, so I scooted over to the edge of the bench and kept my head down. He moved as close to me as he could, mind you, still tying the knots in his rope and not looking away from me. At this point, I knew something was going on, but he was a very large man, maybe 6'4" or 250 pounds. So I decided to just get up and stand on the platform. He got up directly after me and stood half a step behind my back. I could feel his breath on my neck. I'm now in a full-blown panic. There's people waiting on the platform, but nobody was noticing what was happening. I decided the best thing I could do was walk up the steps and wait for the train next to the ticket booth. He didn't follow me, so I was relieved. When the train came, I walked down the steps and sat between two ladies. He sat directly across from me. He still had the rope in his hands, tying knots. The end of the rope was in his hands while the rest of it was stuffed in his pocket. The train leaves the station and he's back staring at me openly. He looked hungry, and not in the way that he wanted a meal. I have no words to describe the look in his eyes other than terrifying. I've never seen that look before in my life. I tried to call my mom as a comfort while I waited for my stop to come, but she didn't pick up. I kept my head down, occasionally glancing up to see him unchanged with that same creepy look, just tying and untying the rope. At this point, I'm thinking about escape plans. I knew I shouldn't get off at my stop so he wouldn't know where I live. When I get to the stop before mine, I waited till the very last second to get off the train. The doors won't stop even if you try to get them to open. Right when I hear them start to close, I jump up and sprint to the doors. I get off right as they close. I looked back and saw him trying to run off as well. I could see him pressed against the doors looking me in the eyes. I have never ever been more scared in my life. He was significantly bigger than me and the look in his eyes was unmistakably predatory. I got up onto the street and I asked another girl walking if she could walk with me to my dorm because I was so terrified. I keep thinking about the what ifs. What if I had just gotten off with everyone else? What if he would have followed me? Why did he have the rope? Was he going to kill me? I'm just glad I got off in time because I know with certainty that he wanted to hurt me. I have never seen that look in someone's eyes before and I hope I never do again. If I hadn't been careful, I know he would have tried to hurt me or maybe worse. I just really worry that he might do this again. Be safe out there and watch your surroundings. You never know what someone will do. Number 5. So I've been living in Paris for the past 8 months and have felt relatively comfortable with my surroundings. I was coming home from a club on the first train that goes to my town. This is around 5:30 a.m. Note, I was quite drunk and tired and just wanting to sleep, and I was wearing clothes for going out. There was this guy on the platform who tried to talk to me. I walk over trying to reach the next train car over but failed. There were 2 open seats left, so I sit in one of them. He decides to sit in the one across from me. So he starts telling me,
I really want to marry you. I don't even want to bang you or anything. I just want to be your one and only. Please, will you do the pleasure in becoming my wife?
And as he's saying all of this, he is caressing my thigh. I am genuinely uncomfortable and try to sink down in my chair. I'm just like, no, I'm not interested. I have a boyfriend, which is the truth. So then he says,
if you had a boyfriend, he would be here with you taking you home.
My boyfriend lives 5 hours away, close to the border between France and Germany and Switzerland, so he couldn't be there. I explained that to him and he says he's not a good boyfriend to leave me here all alone. He then says he's a nice guy and he has money and that he wants to take care of me. I again told him I'm not interested. Then I get to my stop and he follows me out after. I beg for him to stop and to leave me alone. He continues talking to me and I start shivering because I didn't bring a jacket with me. He sees this and forcibly puts his jacket on me. He says that I'm not feeling well and that he'll walk me home. I beg him not to. He tries to talk to other people to get them on his side. We reach this one lady who saw my discomfort on the train. We explained both of our sides to her for about 2 hours, I kid you not. She finally says since you're not her boyfriend, you can't walk her home. I'll do it. I was so thankful to her. We left and she had to take her bus to work. I thought that I was finally safe now away from this weirdo, but sadly I wasn't. So I start walking to my apartment. I live about 10 minutes away from the station. I was about halfway there when I hear a whistle. I turn back and lo and behold, it's the creep. He runs up to me and continues to say the same things and beg for my number. He does this all the while he's caressing my face. I slap his hand and tell him if he doesn't stop, I'm gonna hurt him. He continues to harass me, so I threaten to call the police. Only then does he scamper off. I came home at around 8:30 to 9 and cried my eyes out. I'm glad nothing bad happened to me, but I really wish that creep would have left me alone. Number 6. For a bit of context, I'm a 22-year-old female, about 5'2" and about 125 pounds. My mother is 45 years old, 5'0" and would blow over in the wind. We both look much younger than our actual ages, and due to that and small statures have had our fair share with run-ins and with creeps. I tend to carry a small arsenal on me at all times because of this. Pepper spray, taser, pocket knife, and a small dagger inside my purse, so I tend to be pretty confident that I can handle myself. This particular night, however, was the worst we've ever experienced with creepers. My mother and I were grocery shopping at our usual Walmart. It was later on in the day, around 7 p.m. Something we try to avoid because, as I said before, our fair share of run-ins with the creepers. We just pulled into the parking lot and began our trek inside, and I spotted 5 young men, older than myself but still young, standing outside the store laughing and smoking near the front door. I pay it no mind when they glance at me and my mom, and we walk inside to the carts. The men all head inside now, and again I shrug it off but keep a mental note of their faces. I tend to be on the paranoid side. We head inside, moving straight for the grocery section, and as we shop I keep noticing 2 or 3 of the 5 men are in each aisle we go to. Alarm bells start to go off, but I push the paranoia aside and just keep my head high as we walk. Most of the time, confidence puts the creepers off. I make sure to go down a few random aisles just to test it out, and sure enough, at least one of them is always there. Well, my mom starts to notice as well the more aisles we go down, and her hand squeezes mine in warning as she shoots one of the men a death glare when we stop in the cereal aisle. She tended to still be a mama bear despite that I'm a grown woman. The guy, who's now moved about 2 feet from our cart, just glances over and smirks at her. He's tall and lanky with short dark hair partly hidden under a ball cap and a pointed rat-like face. My mom just narrows her eyes, unnerved at his response to her look, and shoots me an unsure glance. I shrug, shooting a look his way before moving around him to grab a box off the shelf a little ways away. The hair on the back of my neck suddenly prickles, and as I turn around quickly, I jump when I see another one of the guys. This one is blonde with shaggy oily hair hanging to his chin with a gray reflective hoodie. He's staring up at the boxes, but a smirk is on his face as he directly stands in my path. My stomach flips and I grit my teeth as I snap. "Excuse me." I try to go around him, but he just moves in my path. A glare is shot at him now, not finding his antics funny, and my mom, seeming to notice, comes to my rescue by pushing the cart directly between us and asking if I'm ready. I nod and he takes the hint to move now, smiling with yellow teeth as he nods to us. My mom only glares, grabbing my arm and hustling us to another aisle. Again and again we run into these guys, and once we finish shopping I'm afraid they might try to follow us outside, so we begin roaming all over the store, taking different routes and aisles. After a while we seem to lose them and we both relax, figuring they gave up. We head to check out. Our Walmart having a self-checkout line made for grocery trips, so we start checking ourselves out. Halfway through unloading our items, I get that hair-standing feeling again. I turn only to notice in the lane right next to us is, you guessed it, the same 5 guys. My stomach drops, eyes moving to my mom's, who stares at them with wide eyes and a furrowed brow. Trying to shake it off, we take our sweet time ringing things up. We figured, seeing as that the guys had no more than 10 items between them and we had a full cart, they would have to move on faster. It seems no one else had decided to check out in our lane, so they decided to go as slow as they'd like, and boy did they. For the next 15 minutes they just sat there watching us as we rang up our groceries, and every now and then ringing things up. My mom grabs my arm and we share a look. I shake my head, starting to get freaked out, as mom, starting to panic, grabs her phone and calls my dad. In her state of panic, however, she turns and wanders a few feet away. Not her best moment, she admits. And when I turn to ring up the last few things, ball cap guy is standing right there. We stare at each other, him grinning with gross stained and messed up teeth. I only glared, dropping the chicken in the bag before reaching for the last item and ringing it up, still glaring at him in a stare down. Mom, now off the phone, hurries back over, only to see ball cap guy standing there while the other 4 sit on the benches located 3 feet away watching us. Ball cap guy simply takes an empty Gatorade bottle that he'd been holding and chucks it into the trash can by the register without breaking eye contact before he turns to go and sit with his friends. Keep in mind they had a trash can right by the register as well, completely empty, while ours was almost full. Mom and I, not knowing what to do, start fiddling around hoping they'd get impatient and leave. Nope. As we pay and get our receipt, they're still there, so my mom grabs my arm and steers me toward customer service, telling me that my dad told my mom to get security to walk us out. The guys move and we walk out once we head over, and I feel relieved that they finally left. The ladies at customer service were amazing and very understanding, and they stood with us the whole time while security, a big man with a calm and confident persona, came over to take their descriptions and went over to the front doors on both entrances to make sure they weren't still around. When he got back, he told us when he went out one of the entrances he found 5 men matching their descriptions hanging around the front of the building out of sight, unless you walk out of the door and turn around. He said that the minute that they saw him, they took off. He also promised to walk us to our car and let the officer outside to know what was going on. We thanked him and the ladies, and we thankfully made it to our car with no problems and haven't seen those men again. Number 7. If you were around and can remember, roll your mind's eye back to the weeks immediately following September 11th, 2001. Everything was America, particularly in the South, and definitely in North Carolina where I lived. There's a large number of military installations there, including a very large army base about an hour from my hometown. Nearly every car had at minimum an American flag bumper sticker, and a frightening majority of people thought anyone who had skin darker than a potato chip was a terrorist. Everyone was super vigilant, and many people took this as an excuse to become overly interested in the lives of their neighbors, sometimes out of concern for their neighbors' safety, and sometimes out of concern for their own. I was 8 years old, and I was pretty sure my elementary school wasn't going to be the target of any massive terrorist attacks, so my brother and I continued to walk to school each day. This was never a problem. We walked to school every day that didn't have totally awful weather for almost all of my grade school existence. My neighborhood even had weekly paved trails, including one that led directly to my elementary school that we always took. I can't remember if it was recent rain flooding the creek beside the trail or just the climate in general making the bugs come out in full force, but that week my brother and I had decided to take a different route and walk along the road. This plan went off without a hitch until we were walking home one day in a big black SUV with tinted windows and giant American flags blocking the view of the back windshield and back seat, slowed down to a crawl and then abruptly stopped in front of us and rolled down the window. The woman inside was blonde, maybe middle-aged, and wearing large sunglasses that obscured much of her face. "It's not safe for you to walk out here," she called out to us. My brother responded with something to the effect of, "It's fine, we always walk home. We don't live far." That was a mistake. She rolled up her window and drove a few feet away before screeching her tires to a halt and rapidly reversing back to us while rolling down her window, and she yelled, "You spit on my car. I know you did. You spit on my car and you need to get in right now so that I can drive you home to your parents and you can apologize in front of them." I looked at my brother and we both shook our heads no, and I called back, "I didn't spit on your car. Look at the side." And then she yelled again, "Get in my car right now so I can take you home." I turned to my brother again, and without a word we both took off running into the woods. My heart was thumping in my chest and I never turned back, particularly after I heard her door open and close. We just kept running. We switched back and forth through the streets and woods, taking several different paths, and finally ended up circling back around until we were home. We just sort of shrugged it off as, "Yeah, that was weird," until maybe 15 years later when I told the story to a friend and their eyes grew wide. She was trying to kidnap you. It's haunted me ever since. Number 8. To give it some context, I was not wearing a very daring or revealing outfit. I had on a high-waist skirt and a crop top, but there was maybe 1 to 2 inches of my skin showing maximum. It really was a normal outfit. I was sitting at the train station. The train was late as usual. Next to me on the bench, I see an old man reading a book that's handwritten in Russian. I actually thought it was kind of cute. Didn't think much of it after that. We finally board the train and the old man ends up sitting across from me. There was no one else in our little booth of 4 benches. The first 30 minutes or so go by without incident. He's reading his handwritten book and I'm also reading a book and just playing on my phone. As we travel, the weather starts to get a bit rainy. After a while, the old man looks up and out the window. He looks at me and starts screaming and pointing out the window. At this point, I notice he seems to be missing part of his face around his eye, but I figured he was so old so you don't stay in perfect shape. I am trying to understand what is happening. He's mostly screaming and not making much sense. I finally understand that he thinks I'm the one who brought on the bad weather. I'm just sitting there shocked, looking to the other passengers for help, and everyone is ignoring me. I turn to look at the man and he's screaming that it's because of my shirt. I must have the devil inside of me because no sane person would wear a crop top, obviously. I don't even say anything at this point. He stops screaming and turns a few pages in his book. He pulls out 2 crosses from his pocket, 1 in each hand, and then holds them towards me and starts performing an exorcism. Parts in what I assume was Latin, parts in Russian and German. He's leaning towards me, crosses in hand, opening and closing his eyes, screaming throughout the exorcism. I don't even know what to do at this point. I couldn't leave the train cart we were in. Even if I got up, he would still see me or find me since it was pretty small. I debated going to hide in the bathroom, but I still had a good 50 minutes left on the train, and I was afraid that he would wait outside the door and hurt me as I eventually tried to leave the bathroom. So I sit there. He finishes his exorcism and seems to be content with it. He keeps telling me that I need to leave the country because the churches in Germany are crap, and I need to go to a good church in Russia for a proper blessing. I nod and sit there. He reads his book. After another 10 minutes or so, he pulls out a card and hands it to me. I look at it. It says his name and photo and says that the holder of this card is severely mentally disabled. I am thinking that maybe he escaped from some kind of facility somewhere. I couldn't get a good look at the name of the hospital. I just anxiously wait for the train ride to end. He says that he wants to follow me to make sure that I can keep the devil out. I say no, that isn't necessary. He says that he will find me and that Frankfurt isn't a big city, and that he can still sense the devil in me, so he's afraid his exorcism didn't work properly. The train is pulling up to the station. He says that I should wait for him and I say no, to which he says that it doesn't matter because he is drawn to the evil inside of me. I get up and as soon as the doors open, I run. I ran and ran and ran. At this point, I don't even know what my destination is. I just know that it needs to be as far away as possible from this man. Eventually, I go into a big shopping mall and I call my friend that I was meeting who comes to join me. I never saw that creepy old man who performed the exorcism ever again. Thank God. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. I'm going to be doing daily videos every single day from now on, so I hope you guys are enjoying all of these videos. Before we close the video out though, I want to give a special shout out to all my $5 and up patrons. So a special thank you to Yulisa, Babe Lincoln, Beth A, Kate E, Carrie B, Celeste S, Courtney T, Ellie S, Howard R, Jacqueline W, Jazzy G, Jennifer M, Jess, Jonathan C, Catherine M, Carrie F, Matthew B, Michael G, Random Randy, Sage V, Steph L, Tammy S, and Terry H, as well as all of my $3 and up patrons featured on screen as well. Thank all of you so much for your love and support. I really appreciate it more than you know. And until the next video, remember to always stay on.